there. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a coach and I've got a background in consulting. And I work with founders and leaders who are looking to scale their businesses. And like I said, today the conversation is about money and how to make sure you've got enough to take your business where you want it to go. Please ask questions using the chat. And I will try to answer those as we go along. Also, do share your own experience because I don't know everything. So we might all be able to learn from what you've experienced, what you found works, and no knowledge is lost. Okay, so let's dive straight in. Finance is the lifeblood of any business. And a few of us might know the saying, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king or queen. And sometimes actually having too many customers can be a bad thing. I know all of us understand that to survive, the business needs to generate turnover, and that means you have customers. But I'm not sure how many of you have heard of overtrading. And overtrading is when you have too many customers. And that can actually take your business completely out. It's much more likely to happen with a service business than with retail, but it's not unheard of. And it happens when the rate at which the business is spending to deliver the goods or the services is much faster than the rate at which money is coming in from those customers. And I'll illustrate that with an example. So here we've got the example of a recruitment firm that was working with an airline in the airline sector. And it was providing people to go in and do security and other facilities types of roles. And they were paying their staff weekly. However, the clients they were working with were paying them monthly. So every week they had to pay salaries to the people that they had provided to the airlines, but they were getting the income from the airlines on a monthly basis. And after a while, it was becoming difficult to keep up, especially as the business grew. They had more salaries to pay more quickly, and it was hard to keep up. What they decided to do was to take on factoring. And factoring is a way in which you can get money advanced on the basis of the invoices that you've raised. And that helped for a while. But then one of their customers had some problems of their own and became very, very slow to pay their invoices. And that meant that the factoring company decided, well, they're not going to hang on to that. They're going to actually send those invoices back and stop advancing money. And in the end, this recruitment business had to close down. It can be quite common because, you know, when you are having to pay money out quite quickly and you're not getting the money in at the right rate, it can really cramp your business. Even though you've got a good service, a good offering, and people want it, the fact that you haven't got the cash going through the business can really slow you down or stop you in your tracks. So to have enough cash within the business is obviously the best way to avoid examples like what I've just talked through now. But actually doing that, how do you do that? And the first thing that comes to most people's minds is to improve profitability. And absolutely, yes. You can improve your profitability perhaps by increasing your prices, maybe by reducing the costs, sometimes by increasing the turnover, but usually it's the prices and the costs that you have to play around with in order to increase the profitability. the bit that most people's minds don't go to when they're thinking about increasing the cash within their business is working with balance sheet items. And what do I mean by balance sheet items? Balance sheet items are things like debtors. How many people owe you money? And what you want to do is to minimize the number of people that owe you money. How do you do that? Well, in the case of the airline business that we were talking about earlier on, they had offered their clients 30 days terms to pay, as opposed to saying, well, actually, I want my money on presentation of invoice. So it was taking a month before the money came in, but meanwhile, they were having to pay, the staff weekly. What you could do is actually say to your customers, you want to be paid upon presentation of invoice. Some will negotiate with you, but many won't. Many will pay you when you say you want to be paid. A lot of small businesses assume that they have to offer 30 days terms or 60 days terms, but actually it's down to you, and you need to understand what else is being offered in your sector and decide whether or not this is an area that you want to leverage in order to bring money into your business. The other thing that you might want to do is to maximize your creditors. So creditors are people that you owe money to. And basically it's a flip side of a debtors. So in this case, you want to maximize. So when people come to you and say, well, okay, we love your business and we want to work with you, you might say to them, yeah, and when I buy from you, I will pay your invoices in 60 days or 90 days or 30 days. But if you can, you want to be trying to get as much time as possible from them before you pay their invoice, which in effect means that they are acting a little bit like an overdraft or a loan to you. Now, you might not be able to do it in all cases, but you can always try. And that's a good way to maximize money coming into your business. The other area that people, sorry, let's try and go back. The other area people don't think about is stock or work in progress. Having a lot of stock lying around means you have a lot of money lying around doing nothing for your business, but you actually, it's stuck. You can't spend it because it's already in, materials or even work in progress. I found, website developers and people in software have lots and lots of little jobs that they've started, but they haven't finished. And because they haven't finished, they can't invoice for the balance of what that's going to cost. So they've got this potential money that they can't get because they haven't finished the job. And that again is you not maximizing that cash into your business. You've got potential cash, but you haven't got the actual cash. And it might be better to slow down the rate at which you are accepting new pieces of work and finish a few so that you can get the money in and be consistent in getting the money in. Get people, and with that consistent money coming in, you can then get people to help so that when you start to have more and more pieces of work coming in, you can actually deliver it quickly. So that's the stock and work in progress, trying to minimize that. The other thing on the balance sheet that you want to minimize is something called accruals. And that basically is you paying ahead of things. Sometimes you might pay for your utilities ahead of time. Sometimes you pay some subscriptions ahead of time. Wherever possible, you want to minimize doing that and only pay after the event, after you've had the service or at the time of receiving the service. Because again, when you pay in advance, you are in effect loaning somebody else money and not receiving any interest for it. And on the other side, people paying you in advance, so getting customer deposits, getting advance payments, that's definitely something that you want to maximize. So depending on what you do and how you do it, you might want people to pay a deposit before you even start the work, and then structure the payments so that you are getting money in as the work is advancing. And that might reduce that gap between when you start the work and when you've got all that work in progress lying around that you're not getting any money for. And then the other thing that you might want to think about very carefully is who your customers are. And try and tailor that. It's not always possible, but try and tailor that to the to the stage that you are with your business. So if you are at a stage where you need money to come in quickly, then you're not going to want to go for the big corporate people where the fixed terms are 90 days and there's nothing that you can do about it. You just have to wait those 90 days before you get paid. You might want to work with smaller customers who you can tell that you want to be paid immediately. So that's something that you should consider. I'm going to pause for a minute and just check my chat in case there's anything in there in terms of questions. Not seeing anything now. However, I'm seeing that there's some people not getting a passcode. I can't deal with that right now, so I am going to have to move on. Okay, so no questions. I'm going to move on to the next slide. As long as you have done as much as you can to maximize the money within your business by working with your profitability and working with your balance sheet items, you might still find that you have to explore things that are outside of your business in order to bring even more money in. And where that's the case, and it's relevant, then you need to be quite careful about knowing in advance that you need the money. Because if you are waiting until you are hitting that overdraft, until you realize that you haven't got enough to pay your salary at the end of a week or month, then you start to look very desperate, and you feel desperate, and you can get offered really poor funding, which is very expensive funding, and you might take it just because you feel a bit desperate. So the best thing to do is to have what I call a crystal ball, so that you can see when you're going to need money and you can plan ahead. Now, that crystal ball is perhaps not in your profit and loss projections, which a lot of people rely upon to see whether or not their business is doing well. Am I making a profit at the end of every month? Now, this sheet that I've put up here, please ignore the detail. The only thing I'm trying to illustrate here is that with this startup organization, they had created a profit and loss projection showing when they thought they would start to be able to make sales, how much they'd be able to sell each month, how much things were going to cost them each month. And on the basis of that, they could see that the first few months were going to net them losses, but once they got past month 5, they were going to start to be profitable. And if they decided to raise money or work out how much they needed to put into the business based on the amount of initial losses that they're going to make, they would come up with an amount that's around £13,500, £14,000. And that would seem very reasonable. Let me put 14,000 in, it will cover those losses, and I will have enough to actually get through until I start to become profitable. However, that's not the full picture. A much better way of understanding how much you need is to create something called a cash flow projection. And the difference between this and the profits and loss that I just put up a second ago is that it is taking into account the timing of when the payments need to happen, and also the timing when money might come into the business. So in the previous slide, we had the business starting to sell in month 2, but you'll see on this slide is actually getting the money in month 3. That's because this business is operating in a sector where they have to offer 30-day terms. Therefore, even though they are making the sales in month 2, the cash doesn't hit their bank account until month 3. And it's that sort of allowance that means that actually they need to have over £17,000 available to them in order to actually work through those early months where there's more money going out than coming in. They are having, they don't have the benefit of, people being able to look at their accounts and so on. So they have to be able to pay on time, probably immediately, but they are not getting money in as quickly as they are paying it out. And therefore they need a bit more money in order to survive. So what this cash flow projection is showing is that at the worst point, they need £17,500. They are down £17,500, not the 13,500 that we thought earlier on, which is a big difference. And therefore, if they were to raise maybe 18,000, they should have enough money to carry them through until they start getting money coming into, as they start getting money coming into the business. That also is obviously on the assumption that people pay when they're supposed to pay, but we can talk about that as well. Okay. Now, I do appreciate that the cash flow projection looks quite complicated. It doesn't have to be. So this version is also a cash flow projection. And it is as simple as saying what you're going to spend and when you expect to spend it, and what's going to come in and when you expect it to come in. So, and all you're doing is putting that information in so that you know when you might go into the red. So you can see in this business, they are going into the red, around the 3rd of November, so they can plan ahead to ensure that they've got something. Maybe it's a short-term overdraft, or they put some money in, but at least they know that they need to put some money in to cover that. Or perhaps, depending on what it is they were planning to pay out, if they're able to delay that payment, then they can delay that payment until they've got money coming in. Again, I'll just pause in case there's any questions. Okay. If not, I will keep going. So once you've done everything you can to work out what your funding is, you need to start thinking about what type of external funding you might want to explore. And there are different types of external funding. You might want to consider loans, you might want to consider equity. And there's differences between them. And I will start with loans. On the loan side, there's 2 main types of loans that you might want to consider for your business. There's what we would call the working capital loan, and what I tend to term the sort of stepped change loan. And the difference really is that the working capital loan is something that is more immediate, whereas a step change is more about strategic thinking, you are planning ahead for the business. And let's just explore that by talking about the different things that would fall under working capital versus, the step change. So under working capital, it might be an overdraft. You just need something that will allow you to get through a sticky patch. So you arrange with your bank to allow you to go into overdraft. And once the money comes in from your customers, you're back in the black, and you only paid interest for the short time during which you were actually using that overdraft facility. Or perhaps you've got some smaller items that you need to purchase, and you decide to take a term loan to actually cover the cost of that. And you might take a term loan over 12 months or a bit longer, but you have a fixed time in which you're going to pay that loan back, and you pay it with interest. Other types of working capital are things like factoring, or also term discounting. And that's, remember the example I started off with, that was where we were basically offering an organization money based on the invoices that they have raised and have not yet been paid for. So if you raise invoices where it takes your customers time to pay you, you can work with a factoring company, and in effect, you sell those invoices to the factoring company, and they give you money. If you perhaps give that factoring company an invoice worth £1,000, they might immediately advance you £700 based on that £1,000 invoice. And when the customer has paid that £1,000, they will give you the balance less the interest that they've charged. And lots of organizations use this because you're using an invoice as opposed to your property or so on to fund the business. You do have to be careful that you know that your customers are going to pay you when they said they would pay you, otherwise you can get into difficulties if your customers are too slow to pay. And the final one on the working capital is trade finance, and it's very similar to factoring, except that this is more towards international, so export sales, and that's being able to fund goods that you intend to sell abroad, and that is it's slightly more complicated, but it's the same sort of thing. If we turn our attention then to the step change type of loans, those are usually for larger items where the business is going to use this money. Maybe it's so that you can bring in a top-hitting salesperson and you want to have enough to pay their salary for a few months before they generate the results. Or maybe you need a piece of equipment. So it's something that's more strategic to the business. And you might look to use hire purchase or lease, or even a mortgage, or a loan funded on a second charge on some property you could use to actually do that. So those are loan types that you might want to use to get money into your business. The other type of money that you might want to explore is equity. And equity depends really, equity is where you don't have to pay the money back, but what you're doing instead is you're selling part of your business. So you now have partners in your business, and you are expecting that they will share in the profits of your business. And depending on the type of business, you might be able to find people that will provide you with equity, or you might find it slightly difficult to find people that would provide that sort of equity. But before we talk about who would be interested, let's just explore the different types. In a lot of cases for, regular, I call it regular, businesses that are run by individuals, business angels might be the first port of call after tapping into friends and family. friends and family, they know you, they know what you're capable of, and they trust you, and would be the very first source you need to talk to. But if you've gone beyond that and you're getting to a space where you need even more money coming in, then business angels would be a good place to look. If you are a more established organization and you can evidence that this business is going to be really extremely profitable, then you might want to consider private equity. Usually after you've done a bit of business angel funding and you've got to a stage where you can evidence where you're going. And private equity is same sort of thing. You are selling shares in your business. However, they on the private equity fund, they are basically investing institutional funds. They invest in pension funds, they invest in family funds, and they are looking for really high returns. And therefore, that's why I said is, you're more established and you have more evidence to show that you're going to be able to grow much more quickly. In both cases, being able to show, so both business angel and private equity, being able to show that you are going to grow very rapidly is fundamental to being attractive to those sorts of funding providers. In terms of deciding for yourself which type of business you want, which type of funding is going to be relevant for you, you need to consider a few things. You need to consider how quickly you need the money. And I've added another category on this slide. I've added grants. Because in some cases, grants might be relevant to your business, depending on what it is you're doing. So in terms of the speed at which you might be able to get the money, loans tend to be faster than any of the other types of funding. Loans, there's set criteria, and as long as you can, demonstrate that you achieve those criteria, usually you'll be able to get that loan or that overdraft within a few weeks or possibly even days. So it's fairly quick. Whereas with grants, usually there are certain windows when those grants might be available. So therefore, if you're not looking at the right time, you might find you have to wait before the grant window is open. And the application processes can be competitive. So it might, so it's not assured that you can get it. And typically the application process takes a fair amount of time. Equity as well, even once you've found somebody who says, yes, I'm interested in buying some shares in your business, that you've then got to go through the due diligence process where they, kick the tires, they look under the hood, and they really make sure that they understand who you are and what your business is before they actually part with their money to go into the business. So again, that takes time. In terms of whether or not you need to provide security, with grants, no. A lot of loans are, yes, not all, but a lot of them would require security. And with equity, no, you should not need to provide security in order to raise equity. In terms of the amount of money that you can raise with the different types of business, for the grants, it really depends. It depends on the types of funding organizations you are approaching. Usually they have set amounts that they would want to provide to any organization. And you can't go beyond that. Sometimes it depends on the number of beneficiaries that you're helping. So it can really vary. With loans, really, it depends on what your business needs. So the amounts can vary. With equity, I'd almost say yes, but I'll default to no. So it's not any amount because, can't go looking for equity, or you shouldn't be going looking for equity for really small amounts, except if you're talking to friends and family. Friends and family, fine, but you still need to consider how much you're diluting your ownership. You're talking to your friends and family and you're giving away so many percentage for, £2,000. When you need more, you find you've got less of a share to play around with. So you really need to consider how much that you're looking for, and wait, till you need something more substantial and you can show that your business has more intrinsic value before you go ahead on that side. In terms of the sector that you're in, loans would be the most flexible option for your business sector, because lenders will look at anything. It's just, as long as they can see that this business can generate the income to make the repayments, they will be quite happy to lend. Grants are very, 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 very picky. You have to be doing what it is they want you to do in terms of making the change, serving the cause that they want to support before they will even consider taking an application from you. And in a lot of cases, it wouldn't be profit-making organizations they would fund. It would be sort of social organizations that they would want to fund, or even charities. In terms of equity, I'd say that again is very selective, because you have to be in a sector where it's possible to scale the business and generate very high multiples in terms of profitability. And not all sectors are like that. Some sectors, mean that even though you can become very, very profitable, you need to put a lot of investment behind it, and therefore you might find that you've got nothing left of your business by the time you go down that route in order to get enough equity to grow that business effectively. And finally, in terms of the market size, with grants, it shouldn't matter. Same thing with loans. Again, for the equity side, they are looking at markets that are really wide, typically global, and have the prospect of generating quite a big impact. Okay. So that's a summary of the different types of external funding that you might be able to get into your business. I am not seeing any questions in the chat yet, still. I've probably done something wrong, but here we go. Anyway, hopefully people can see the recording, and that will work just as well. Okay, so I've got a sample cash flow tool that people can use. So if you want a copy of that, then do contact me. My email address is on there, and I have put my LinkedIn in the chat as well. So you can contact me either way. Yeah, I think that is everything for now. Still checking in case there are questions. And I am still not seeing any. Okay, in which case, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. Quite happy for people to email me after the event.